Coming up, Tennessee's hire of Jeremy Pruitt signals a brand new era for the Vols, but it is at the end of an era for one of Tennessee's biggest rivalries. We'll talk about it next on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, welcome to AT&T SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Good to have you with us on our show. And we finally have a Tennessee coaching hire to talk about. After lots of false starts and lots of, we think this may be the guy, only to have his name removed from consideration, Tennessee has its man, and we'll talk about whether or not it's a good hire, among a lot of other things on today's show.
Congratulations to the Tennessee fan base. You guys have waited a long while for this. Been some ups and downs for Tennessee fans, but I think they landed the right guy, a good guy in Jeremy Pruitt, good coach.
Well, let's actually dive into that right now. I'll remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list is the hire of Jeremy Pruitt. Becoming official today, he is the Vols guy. You sort of touched on this a moment ago. I'll let you expand on these thoughts now. You think that Pruitt's the right hire for Tennessee?
I do. Given the circumstances, obviously they were looking for a guy that brings toughness, a guy who can kind of coach up this defense and not allow them to be as porous as they have been in years past under Butch Jones. That's what he's going to bring. He's going to bring a tough defense. He's going to bring a lot of football knowledge. He's a great coach, a great recruiter, and I think he's the right hire for this point in time for Tennessee. You need a guy who can kind of build from the ground up. And, from a lot of people I talked to today, Vols fans aren't sure whether to be real happy about the hire. I don't know if a lot of them consider it a home run hire, but I think that Philip Fulmer's back was against the wall, this Tennessee program's back was against the wall, and I think they went out and got the right guy considering the circumstances.
Well, let me deal with this off the top. There's a lot to kind of get into with this, but what do you think about some of the online chat? I know Mike Griffith, who covers Tennessee for SECCountry.com, he had a tweet along these lines. Chris Lowe from ESPN kind of tweeted this out a little bit as well, that, you got Pruitt, the Alabama alumnus, Alabama coach, had coached under Nick Saban here the last couple of years, also before that, before heading out to Florida State and Georgia for a few years. So this hated third Saturday in October rivalry between Tennessee and Alabama. In Tennessee's time of sort of darkest need, it turns to an Alabama guy as coach. That's certainly what would have happened years in the past. And Philip Fulmer, who's sort of thought of as kind of a public enemy number one of Alabama, dating back to his time as Tennessee coach, the fact that he's the guy that pulls the trigger on this. I mean, how weird is that for you?
Well, I think it's weird. I think it's extremely weird. When you start to line up how reportedly, how much hate Philip Fulmer has for the University of Alabama and all things going on with the Crimson Tide, but I think, like I said, his back was against the wall. I don't think Philip Fulmer had a ton of places to turn. Whether you're going to go to T. Martin, whether you're going to try to hire somebody with Tennessee roots, I think that you almost had to go this route. You had to think of something outside the box, to me, if you're part of that Tennessee program. I think that's what he did. He vetted all these coaches, had a couple of different meetings with Mel Tucker and Jeremy Pruitt and some of the other coaching names he floated around for the last couple of days, and he settled on Jeremy Pruitt. I think the biggest thing you look at as far as Jeremy Pruitt goes is this is a guy who's risen up the coaching ranks, but it's because he's a great recruiter. He can go into Alabama, he can go into Georgia, he can go into South Carolina, and begin to recruit these players that Tennessee hasn't really gotten over the last few years.
Josh Rowan says Pruitt was a great hire for the Vols. He proved it at 3 different schools that he can coach and recruit Go Dogs. Josh says that as a Georgia fan, and I would certainly agree that time at Florida State, success. Time at Georgia, success. Here at Alabama now as defensive coordinator, certainly a success. But the rivalry thing I can't let go of just yet. I think this is one of those deals that, if you want to talk about what is the thing that sort of gives Tennessee fans the lowest morale of all the issues the program is dealing with, it is that losing streak against Alabama. How Pruitt talks about Alabama is going to matter here. Certain coaches can sort of get by with the coach speak. Every game matters. Hey, we're trying to win them all. We're trying to win our division. I think because Pruitt has these ties to Alabama, because Tennessee fans are so hungry to see this rivalry change, they beat Florida not this most recent year, but the year before that. They ended that long streak against the Gators. What's hanging over Tennessee fans' heads right now is that long losing streak to Alabama. Pruitt's got to show some teeth with the way that he talks about Alabama. Almost like a politician sort of throwing some red meat to the constituency. You've got to say bad things with the Crimson Tide. You've got to talk about how much you want to beat Nick Saban. Even though he's your mentor, you've got to say these things. Otherwise, there's reason to be suspicious of Pruitt at Tennessee.
I definitely think there is. And listen, I think a lot of people, Tennessee fans at least, have the wrong idea when they think of Jeremy Pruitt being from Alabama, just as a guy who grew up in the state of Alabama. This guy's from Rainsville. I mean, this is like really close to Chattanooga. It's closer to Chattanooga than it is Birmingham. Okay. He's in the northeast corner of the state, so he's not that far away from Knoxville. I mean, he's in an area where he grew up. Now, yes, he did go to Alabama. Yes, he did graduate as a defensive back there at Alabama. But this is a guy that also went to Middle Tennessee State and transferred to Alabama. I mean, he's got roots in the state of Tennessee and close to the state of Tennessee. So, I hate to think that we're going to label this guy as a Crimson Tide player and an Alabama coach. He's got roots all over the place. You mentioned he's been to Florida State, he's been to Georgia, he's worked his way around the SEC. And I think, like I said, the first and foremost thing this guy brings, he's going to bring a tough team and he's going to have great recruiting. Now, can he bring the right offensive coordinator? Can he get these systems to work? Can he be the coach that Tennessee needs for the long haul? All those things remain to be seen. But I think in terms of what you needed right now, it's a good spot to go.
Couple more comments. Josh Woods pushes back on the idea of it being a desperate hire for Tennessee. The truth is it was a desperate situation, but the hire itself is actually a pretty well-orchestrated maneuver here, because the one thing I think that Jeremy Pruitt gives you that none of the other candidates, at least the recent batch, was going to give you is the chance to be great. Dave Doeren would not have been an unmitigated failure, but the chance of him being a great coach at Tennessee is probably not that likely. Certainly the same thing with Greg Schiano. Not an unmitigated failure almost for sure, maybe the ceiling not quite as high as some Vols fans want. There's a chance that Jeremy Pruitt's an outright disaster. He's never been a head coach before. He's a relatively young guy. However, there's also the chance, because he's cut from that Nick Saban cloth, because he is a good recruiter, that the ceiling for true great success, much, much higher levels of achievement, it's actually open here for Pruitt because of the track record that he has. I mean, Tennessee may have actually fallen into a pretty good situation here.
And I think that's what it is. I think the reason a lot of people say it's kind of a desperation hire is because you look at the fact that he did an interview with Mississippi State a couple of weeks ago and kind of got turned down for that job. And maybe that's where a lot of that sentiment comes through. But listen, I consider Jeremy Pruitt a friend. I've known the guy for years. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago on the field. This guy went out of his way to walk across the field to be able to speak to me a couple of weeks ago. And that's what you're going to get if you're a Tennessee fan. You're going to get a guy that I promise you, after this press conference and a lot of these things start to weigh themselves out, you're going to fall in love with the guy that is going to be your head coach.
Do you worry at all, if you're Tennessee, about the fact that he is apparently going to stick with Alabama through the college football playoff? The first Alabama game was on January 1st. That's more than a week after the early signing period ends on December the 22nd. This is a new era for college football, this early signing period. Tennessee is already up against the clock when it comes to recruits. They just lost Trey Dean to four-star safety even today. Is it a mistake for Tennessee to allow its new coach not to come take the job until at least after January 1st? And if Alabama beats Clemson, it's a whole other week plus after that.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I don't know if they had an alternate decision. I think that it came down to three guys. I think it came down to Pruitt, Mel Tucker, and Chad Morris. And when Chad Morris took the job at Arkansas, all of a sudden you're left with Mel Tucker, who's going to be in the playoffs, and Jeremy Pruitt, who's going to be in the playoffs. So I think that was probably something Pruitt went in there with. And I said this yesterday. If I'm Nick Saban, I don't know if I really want Jeremy Pruitt around. I don't know that, that there's such a cause of conflict. These guys spend 14 hours a day in the football complex, and probably 7 hours of that for Jeremy Pruitt now is going to be calling recruits, seeing if you can get a class lined up for Tennessee. I did hear one tidbit today that made me feel a little bit better. A couple of years ago when Kirby Smart took the job at Georgia, he shared an office with Jeremy Pruitt on their way out the door. As they're switching kind of locations, they're sharing an office. So he watched Kirby Smart go through this, watched him get the bowl prep in. So maybe there's a little bit of that background.
Slight difference there, though, in the fact that Georgia and Alabama just don't play each other very much. It's a rotational deal in the SEC West. Before that, they didn't play much either. So Tennessee is a program that plays Alabama each and every year. So Jeremy Pruitt is sitting in the office right now of a place that he's going to coach against third Saturday in October. That does make the Pruitt transition to Tennessee a little different than the Kirby Smart transition to Georgia.
I think it makes a ton different. And that's kind of what spurred my comments yesterday, where I'm like, I don't know if I'm Nick Saban. Do you want Jeremy Pruitt going up and giving an introductory press conference and being like, hey, one of our goals is going to be to beat Alabama every year and the Crimson Tide down there in Tuscaloosa, and then he's going to get on a plane and come back to Tuscaloosa and go back in the meetings room with your players? I think it develops into kind of a weird situation, but I think if anybody can handle it, it's Jeremy Pruitt. And
Corey Tester in the comment section says he's not worried about Jeremy Pruitt coming after the college football playoff, just excited to get a good coach. Corey, we appreciate you weighing in. By the way, a lot of you in the comment section talking about who exactly Jeremy Pruitt might bring with him as offensive coordinator. We've got a lot on that coming up a little later on in our program today here on AT&T SEC Country Live. For now, let's move on to item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We're kind of on that award circuit around college football right now, where a lot of these rubber chicken dinners, things like that, are taking place. A lot of media members show up at this kind of stuff, a lot of players and coaches there. One of these recent events, Reese Davis, the ESPN broadcaster, was asked to share some of his thoughts about Jalen Hurts. I want to show this to you in light of some of the stuff we've been saying about Hurts here recently on this show, or maybe more specifically, what I've been saying. Charlie Potter, who covers Alabama, tweets this out. That Reese Davis, talking about Jalen Hurts, says, is he the most polished passer in the country? No, he's not. But that dude's a winner. He's a great athlete. He's got plenty of arm strength. His demeanor is perfect, what you want in a quarterback, and he has the team. So that's praise of Jalen Hurts by ESPN's Reese Davis, who's obviously very plugged in the college football scene. But it takes me back to something that I've been saying about Alabama in the college football playoff. I think Alabama's lucky to be here. Not because its resume is not deserving. You can make a strong case that Alabama should have gotten in over Ohio State, but a lot of Tide fans probably didn't think it was going to happen, and now they've got new life for the program. I think if I'm Alabama, regardless of the fact that Reese Davis says that Jalen Hurts is just a winner, I seriously give some consideration to playing Tua Tagovailoa, at least some, against Clemson on New Year's Day. And not only bring him in if Jalen Hurts struggles, go into the game knowing you're going to play Tua some. If I was Alabama coach Nick Saban, that's what I do, regardless of what Reese Davis thinks about Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and listen, to me, as the saying goes, success is the biggest opponent of, I don't even know how that goes. I can't even complete that sentence. But this is kind of the argument I've had within myself about Jalen Hurts throughout this entire season and last season. I think Jalen Hurts is a winner. I agree with Reese Davis. He's got the team behind him. He's got the numbers to back it up. He's got the record. The only thing that anti-Jalen people keep, getting in my ear about is, and I think it's true. Listen, Blake Sims was a great quarterback at Alabama. Had a great record. Lost one game to Ohio State. Jacob Coker was undefeated. The only game that Alabama lost in 2015, he didn't start. And so I think you start to get in this track record where, listen, if you're going to go by record, every quarterback Alabama's had has been great over the last 10 years. And I think that's a scary thing for Alabama fans. Let's not cap what we could possibly be. I think Jalen Hurts has a very high ceiling, but I think it's a lower ceiling than Tua Tagovailoa. I just don't know if the timing's right just yet. That's something Saban's going to have to figure out on the practice field. But the record thing to me only goes so far.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Alabama's going to beat almost every team that it plays. And a lot of the wins that Jalen Hurts has compiled as a quarterback, the quarterback on the other side of the field was not an NFL guy. I'm talking about guys like Danny Etling, who, yes, he has beaten. Some of the other guys, that Hurts has compiled wins against, these are not elite players. But when he faced Deshaun Watson last year, he lost that game. When he faced Jarrett Stidham this year, he lost that game. Watson is in the NFL. Jarrett Stidham's going to be in the NFL. When he's facing another high-caliber quarterback, that's when Jalen Hurts has not been a winner. So if you're a winner when you're facing quarterbacks of a lesser caliber than you, or when your team's playing a team that's a lesser caliber than you, then I do think that record at that point in time can be a bit inflated. I think you've got to look more at just the record when you look at Jalen Hurts. And for me, the stats sort of tell a story of a guy who's not likely to win a national championship for Alabama.
Yeah, and listen, how many times this offseason do we have this conversation about Tua and Jalen Hurts? And my answer always was Jalen is he's not going to get Alabama beat. If you're going to beat Alabama, you have to have a quarterback that can go out and beat Alabama. They're not going to beat themselves. And Jalen Hurts hasn't beat this team. And this defense hasn't hurt this team. But if you do want to go out and beat a team that can beat you, that you don't have to rely on yourself, you beating yourself if you're Alabama, then you do look at these situations and think maybe on some of these third downs Tua has to get in. I don't know the answer. I'm not on the practice field, but I'm just telling you, I would give it a 25, 30, 35% chance that Tua finds a package or a role.
Some of y'all are shouting at me, so let me let you hear someone tell me why I'm wrong about this, and then I'll take some of your comments. Mark Burnett on AT&T SEC Country Live on Monday. He thinks it's ridiculous that Tua Tagovailoa would come in place of Jalen Hurts. Here's Mark.
I don't ever want to say never, but that would be absurd in my opinion. You're basically saying that this true freshman who hasn't played they didn't play him in the last 3 SEC games. You're going to stick him in the national semifinal because you think he could be a better passer. I mean, you're not factoring in any of the first team reps or different things like that. Just the actual composure of being on that big of a stage. To me, I think that would be doing the kid a disservice. In my honest opinion, I really do.
So let me run through some of these comments. Jeremy Pettis says, Hurts will come through in the clutch. He's fire. Cliff Nelson says, Hurts can't read a zone defense, doesn't get to his second read. He's a running back playing quarterback. Stephen Lawrence in the comment section says, Jalen Hurts is no Jake Fromm. Stephen Cromer says, if Alabama and Clemson played today, Clemson would win, but give Saban a month to prepare and a healthy team. Alabama's going to be tough. I think one of the things that can make him tougher in that case was Tua Tagovailoa. Kevin Donaldson says, Hurts is going to do his thing on January 1st. Just watch. So a lot of Alabama fans are still big believers in Jalen Hurts, but I think the thing you're going to be careful about here is this based on a track record of accomplishment that's less difficult than what it's going to be like facing Clemson in the national semifinal, or either Jake Fromm or certainly Baker Mayfield in the potential national championship game.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I think you feel okay about Jalen Hurts. If Jalen Hurts goes into January 1st and gets all the snaps, Alabama's still going to be favored. They're favored right now. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast when you play an Alabama team that's not going to turn the ball over. They're going to try to be ball hawks in the secondary. They're going to try to create turnovers on defense. But how high do you want the ceiling to go?
Yeah.
I think, and listen, this whole thing about him being a true freshman, I understand that. You know, I've seen true freshmen play. Jalen Hurts was a true freshman last year. But we are in the game number 13 of the year.
Right.
I mean, this is Tua's gotten a ton of reps this year. He's been practicing all year. He's seen live reps in live games. So I don't think it's that crazy to think you just throw a true freshman in. We're in January. I mean, he's been enrolled for a year now.
Brandon Moore says Jalen Hurts can't get it done by himself. He's got a great defense that wins games and a running game. And to go back to your point about Tua Tagovailoa only being a freshman, so if you're not going to play him this year because he's a freshman, well, Jalen Hurts only a sophomore. Are you never playing Tua Tagovailoa? You let him sit the bench for 3 years? Because when he's played, I see a guy that's got the kind of, sort of moxie as a quarterback that it'd be a shame to see him waste his entire career backing up Jalen Hurts until, basically the end of his eligibility as an upperclassman. Are you never going to play Tua Tagovailoa? Because he's always going to be younger than Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. I think the question goes to, what are they going to do in spring practice? If you don't see Tua Tagovailoa line up January 1st or January 8th or whenever you might see a guy like that play, then I think that he's got to be given some assurances from Nick Saban that he's going to get a shot at this job in spring ball. Otherwise, what's he doing there? And then, you look right behind him. His brother is a big-time recruit in the state of Alabama right now, playing for Thompson High School. And what do you do with him? Is he gonna? Are you gonna chance Tua possibly transferring and his brother maybe going where he's at to just for this whole Jalen Hurts saga? I don't know the answer. I flip back and forth on it probably as much as anybody.
By the way, Cliff Nelson gives me a hard time. He says that Jarrett Stidham's not going to play in the NFL. He says he'll be gone after 2 years. I think Stidham's an NFL quarterback.
I think he probably is. And listen, Zach Mettenberger played for like 4 years in the NFL, so let's not knock down Jarrett Stidham just yet.
David Yarborough says, how do we know that Tua is any better than Jalen Hurts? He's got no meaningful snaps in pressure situations. I agree he's a better passer, but it takes more than that. That's true, but you're about to go into a game against Clemson on January 1st. The quarterback last year went 11 of 30 against this defense. Do you think 11 of 30 this year is getting it done against this Clemson team? I don't. Now, I've been saying this since before the offseason. I don't believe that Alabama's going to win a national championship with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. Here you are 2 games away from doing it with a chance to put in a guy who I just flat out think is better. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Alabama does here. Now, the odds are Saban will go conventional on this. I do agree with something else that Mark Burnett said on Monday, that he probably regrets making the unorthodox, unconventional decision of replacing Lane Kiffin before the national championship game a year ago. But that showed to me a level of micromanagement that maybe he regrets right now. But it's also important that you don't swing too far back in the other direction either.
Yeah, you know what kind of reminds me of this situation too. I'm looking at both SEC teams getting in the playoff. Looking back, don't you wonder if it was maybe a blessing in disguise for Georgia that Jacob Eason gets kind of dinged up there in the first game? And because if Jacob Eason plays out this year like he did last year, and we both said he was going to be improved. But if you see Jake Fromm coming in and getting quality snaps, doesn't that start to build and say, maybe Jake Fromm is Jake Fromm going to ride the pine for the rest of his career?
Listen,
Jalen Hurts, his legs are what separate him from Tua right now. But it is an interesting dynamic.
I'll be the first to tell you, there is no way that Jacob Eason, who was the original starter for Georgia this season, would be having as good a year as Jake Fromm is right now.
I don't think so either.
Fromm's more than 2 yards per attempt better than Eason was as a freshman. That's what Fromm's been this year. And I think that if Fromm is this much better as a freshman than Eason was last year, the idea that Eason would have used that experience to have, had this kind of performance this year, I just don't think it'd been likely to happen.
I don't think so either. That's what I mean. It's kind of a blessing in disguise. Where how do you take a guy in Jacob Eason out that's a true sophomore and has been playing for such a long time? He gets injured, but Jake Fromm in. All of a sudden, this guy is a world killer. But Jalen Hurts hasn't missed any games, so it's a lot of people have a hard time opening their eyes to the fact that you take out a guy with that record, but I don't think you just do it. I don't think you go into January 1st and sit Jalen Hurts down. I think you just find a way to get Tua in for 10 snaps during the game. I think there's a spot for him in this game plan.
All right, so a lot of folks weighing in on that. We'll take more of your comments here on AT&T SEC Country Live. And I realize a lot of the Bama folks don't agree with me on this. I just want to know that I want y'all to know what my opinion is, so after the game we all come here and talk about it in the same frame of reference. I'm telling you now what I think is going to happen. I don't think Jalen Hurts gets it done against the Clemson defense. We can certainly talk about that when the time comes. Speaking of Georgia, let me move on here to item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We just mentioned the Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm. How about the quarterback on the other side of the field for the Oklahoma Sooners? Baker Mayfield. He's the likely Heisman Trophy winner, and he's already gotten a chance to get to know some Georgia fans because apparently his phone number kind of got disseminated among the internet. I think we told you about this the other day. And, well, let Baker Mayfield tell you the story of exactly how all this went down. Here's Baker.
So I was in Arkansas for the Burlsworth Award on Sunday, got in town to Springdale on Sunday, and I had been getting some calls from Georgia numbers, and I expected that, somebody had given it out because I had about an hour later, and I couldn't use my phone. They called so much that it died, and so I realized that something was going on. So when I got my phone charged back on, I had guys that sent me screenshots that it was posted online, and so they were creative, I'll say that. There was probably about 100 text messages and calls for 45 minutes, so my phone, I think, just blew up.
So here's the brash, cocky Baker Mayfield. Georgia fans infiltrating his cell phone with texts and voicemails. The cocky guy that Mayfield is, he's going to have a real pithy response back to Georgia fans? Apparently not. Apparently he's not even bothered by any of it. Here's Mayfield again.
I respect him. People ask me if I was really that mad. No, not really. It was pretty funny, creative stuff. I'd hope that our fans would do the same thing if they got a chance.
So that's Baker Mayfield kind of talking there about the Georgia thing, saying he wishes his own fans would be like Georgia fans, and if they had a chance to do that, they would do the same thing there as well. So are you surprised that Mayfield, who's a little bit of a kind of an edgy, kind of a cocky guy, certainly kind of got in trouble for some of his sideline antics on the Kansas game this year, that he's apparently not more bothered by Georgia fans? He's kind of taking the sort of the high road here with the Georgia fans. I got to admit, I was a little surprised by that he's not giving any sort of bulletin board fodder back towards Georgia here.
I am too. I mean, he's handling it better than I would have. I mean, you got to go in and change your number. I don't know how long he's had that cell phone number, but I saw this play out with John Parker Wilson and the LSU fans, and I'm telling you, it was not good. Your phone rings so much that it dies like almost immediately, and then you have to go get a new phone number and you have to get your phone switched over. I didn't expect him to take it in stride as much as he is, and I got to give the guy credit for that, because to me, when I looked at it, I was like, I'd be outraged. I'd be outraged if my phone's getting blown up. I'd be outraged at whoever posted online, and he'll probably never figure out who it was, but I'd be outraged at the outcome. But it almost kind of lures me into Baker Mayfield's corner a little bit. Like, he's going to win the Heisman Trophy this week. Makes me feel a little bit better that I'm really a fan of his play, because I haven't really been a fan of his antics. Makes me feel a little bit better about his personality.
Well, I just kind of wonder. Now, I think we may have said this in the show a little earlier in the week. Mayfield, what we've seen from him in his entire body of work is so different than the typical SEC quarterback, maybe even the typical SEC player. For the most part, they're all relatively robotic. They just sort of say what the coaches want them to say, and they don't say anything else. Mayfield has seemingly had the look of being something a little different than that. And yet, right here, he sounds like another one of these SEC robots. He's like, hey, take it one game at a time.
Yeah, he does.
Thank my teammates here.
Yeah.
Can he really go this entire month without saying something to make the Georgia defensive players angry? Because it seems like sort of an unlikely thing to have happen. That Mayfield wouldn't do something over the course of a month to sort of kind of live up to the sort of Johnny Manziel-like persona that some people seem to think he's crafted for himself.
Yeah, I don't know that he can go an entire month. I mean, but listen, he is going to be, suited up in, a tuxedo at some of these award ceremonies. He's going to be, in Manhattan at the Heisman ceremony. He's going to be doing all these things. So I think maybe he can keep a lid on it, but I think this just goes back to the version that we heard from Lincoln Riley like a month ago, where he's kind of crying at the podium, talking about how good of a guy Baker Mayfield is, and we're all kind of sitting there going, "What's he talking about?" I mean, this guy ran from the cops. He's telling, he's grabbing his crotch. He's doing all this crazy stuff. But obviously, there's another version that you haven't seen on camera, and this is one step in that direction of this guy coming out. I don't know if he'll keep a lid on it for the next month, and I think it's very unlikely. But he'll say something. But I don't know if it'll be too outlandish.
Kevin Blackman says it's because he's scared. I don't know if Mayfield's scared of Georgia. I don't think that Georgia should be scared of Baker Mayfield. But there clearly is that feeling out process here of a lot of the fans were responding back to Georgia in a sense towards the original Mayfield statement about, hey, don't make this guy mad, don't make this guy angry. I don't know that Georgia has to be worried about that. I don't know that Mayfield has to be worried about Georgia. I mean, this to me seems just like a really good sort of matchup, sort of an interesting contrast and a clash of styles.
Just speaking of comment section and guys making me angry, this Charles Parker just wrote on here, how many national championships have either of you won? Jalen Hurts will be fine. Guess what? I've won one more than you have, Charles Parker. So you can go back. I can have my opinion. By God, I got my ring at the house.
Yeah, so. Listen, I'm the blowhard that's never won a national championship, but this guy guy's got his own national championship ring. He's got his picture of President Obama. So
I got the picture holding the trophy with Nick Saban. You can get off me. I can have an opinion on this.
We go a whole year. Nobody makes Mike Johnson mad, but it finally happened here in December. The holiday spirit, maybe not right so much over here. That kind of got Mike going there a little bit. So that's pretty interesting. It's AT&T SEC Country Live, and AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long, including throughout all these great bowl games. That's a great way to keep up with what's going on in college football. For now, let's move on to item number 4 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And the Dan Mullen era beginning at Florida. And anytime there's a new coach in place, that means some changes in store. And I guess one of the changes for Florida is an apparel change. Apparently now going to be one of the schools to use the Jordan brand logo on its uniforms. We've got a few tweets here that kind of give you a sense of this change and how it's unfolding. Here's Dan Mullen saying, thanks to the shoe swag, the Jordan brand shoes. I'm colorblind, but I'm assuming that's orange and blue. The Florida colors there on the Jordan brand shoes. Someone else noticed the other day, I think we have this for you on Twitter as well, when Dan Mullen visited Dameon Pierce, the running back from Bainbridge, Georgia. He was also kind of rocking the blue and orange Jordan brand sneakers. So this is what's going to be on the uniforms for Florida. I believe that North Carolina has this. I think that Michigan is a Jordan brand school as well. Those are the Jordan brand schools. Is this going to be a big deal for young people? You think kids are going to want to play for the Jordan brand stuff here? Does this make a noticeable difference? I mean, I know the Jordan brand stuff is popular. I'm not that much of a fool. But is it enough to make a noticeable difference in who goes to your school and who doesn't?
I think possibly. You know what's interesting about this? You remember when we showed the picture last week of Dan Mullen playing basketball? He's playing basketball in Jordans.
No,
it's like, this guy's out on the curb and he's playing basketball in Jordans. I think there's a possibility that I think there's nothing but positivity to come from this, especially when you look at the green uniforms that the Gators wore this past season. I don't know who designed those, but those have got to go somewhere. So I think when you look at Jordan becoming a part of your program, I think it's been positive for Michigan. I wasn't sure what they do with it. It's a football school with a Jumpman logo on their jersey. But I think it's a positive thing. I don't see how it could be kind of turned into a negative thing. I think it's the right direction for it. They're one of the big household top 10 job names in America as far as college football goes, and I think this is a good direction for their football program. I don't love, like I said, I don't love the Jumpman logo being on the jersey, but I think it's a recognition thing
because
when it comes
it's
to
a basketball player.
Yeah, Michael Jordan is on your football jersey logo. I just don't buy into that, but it is what it is. It's a recognition thing for a lot of these recruits.
The one thing that I do think works for Florida, because ultimately I think a lot of this apparel stuff is overrated. I think apparel companies like making the teams think the kid's going to choose their school because of the clothes. But the truth is, if that were the case, then Alabama wouldn't get any recruits, and it essentially gets all of them. Georgia doesn't do a lot of tricky uniforms, and it's going to be in the top 3 of the recruiting rankings. Penn State does fine in recruiting. They don't have a lot of really sexy uniforms. So I think a lot of this apparel stuff, for the most part, is overblown. But there is an overall image that I think that some people are trying to return to Florida. Maybe this helps it, happen. Back in the 90s, Florida's kind of the fun and gun, sort of the fun place to be a part of the college football program. I think Urban Meyer had some of that going on for a slightly different reason in the last decade. For Dan Mullen, kind of getting this hot brand and getting this sort of new look uniform with the logo that's popular with recruits, this does, I think, to a certain extent, restore Florida back to being kind of like that fun place to go to school. A lot of that was lost under Jim McElwain. It's great to have a good defense, but when your program sort of takes on a defensive identity, there's a little bit of fun that's lost from the program, and this may be a dumb thing to say, but the Jordan brand uniforms almost sort of bring it back to the cool factor a little bit.
And listen, when I was in college, the big thing coming out was everybody was wearing the gloves where you do like this and it has the logo on the palms. You can remember that. I think Mark Ingram did that in the national title game, and all the schools that had those gloves, they were like the big schools. Nike was only going to hand those out to like the Alabamas, Ohio States, and some of the bigger schools in the country. This to me is starting to head that direction. Alabama will probably never wear Jordan uniforms. You might never see them in a place like Texas, but this is kind of that new thing to me where it's becoming a new trend, and you want to be part of the school that may be at the top of that mountain. Maybe Florida's moving that direction. I think that Dan Mullen injects a ton of energy into the program after Jim McElwain, who didn't really have that, I don't know, swagger maybe that Urban Meyer and Steve Spurrier had in the past. So I think it's a good direction for them. I really do.
Bo Molinari does agree with you that having a basketball player in a football uniform is just a little bit weird.
It is.
It'd be a hard thing to explain to Bear Bryant.
Yeah. Bear Bryant be rolling over in his grave.
If we sort of went back in time and said, all right, Bear, here's the thing. Florida's got a basketball player on its football uniform. That's not the kind of thing that would have made a lot of sense to him.
No, I mean, Michael Jordan being on your football uniform. I don't think it makes a ton of sense, but you know what? I'm like as illiterate when it comes to of that kind of stuff as anybody. So.
Ian Hornibrook says, but what shoes do they wear in the games? Will it be Nikes or will it be Jordans? That's a great question. I don't know if Jordan makes football cleats, but if these kids are getting a lot of these sort of like, tennis shoes just to walk around in, at that point in time, that may be something they're kind of interested in.
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty sure that Michigan has Jordan logos on their cleats. Now, I think they're designed and obviously kind of made by Nike, but I do think they have Jordan logos on their cleats at Michigan. I might be wrong about that.
All right, let me move on to item number 5 here in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Chad Morris is officially now the head coach at Arkansas. He's been rolled out. He's been announced. And recently the University of Arkansas folks in their own private jet team plane had a chance to catch up with Morris, the brand new coach. And I think that he said something that a lot of Arkansas fans are going to like, especially considering some of the issues of the previous regime. Here's Chad Morris describing the identity that he wants to see Arkansas football have.
Of your offense next season?
Well, we're going to be very explosive. This will be one of the most explosive offenses in all of college football. We're taking the model that we've been about, a two-back run-oriented play-action shot football team, and you got to run the football. I firmly believe that, but you also got to be dynamic, you got to be explosive, and you got to think outside the box a little bit too. So we'll be creative. It'll be fun. There won't be a lot of people sitting down. We like to score, and we like to score fast. So we're excited about taking a whole new approach to a different style of offense that we're bringing to the.
So that's obviously a very different kind of mindset than what Brett Bielema had, which was not a fast offense. They wanted to play as slow as possible. Wanted to run the ball as much as they can. Morris is just diametrically opposed to that in almost every way imaginable. I don't know that every Arkansas fan is super excited about Chad Morris. Based on our comment section, I'm gathering that some are, some aren't. But the majority of the fan base has at least got to be excited about kind of a different kind of offense than the one that Brett Bielema ran. Even though the Bielema offense is what's working to a large degree at Georgia and Alabama, two teams in the college football playoff, it wasn't working at Arkansas, and so a change of philosophy here is probably popular with most fans, even if they're not completely sold on the relatively inexperienced Chad Morris.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who, 8 years in college coaching, he's averaging 460 yards per game as a college coach, offense coordinator or head coach. And after taking over the SMU program, they've gone up 17 points per game in the last couple of years after him taking over. So this is a guy who knows offense. This is a guy who can put points on the board. The thing I keep falling back to is, and we've heard Brent Venables' name a couple times in the last couple of days, will he be hired at Arkansas? Does he want to go that place with Chad Morris and kind of be locked into that entire situation? That's a huge hire for me. More so almost than Chad Morris getting the head coaching job as who they're going to bring in as the DC, because how many times have we seen it? You have a defensive coach. Who can Will Muschamp get as an OC? Who can Jim McElwain? Who did he get at Florida as his DC? That made him a good coach. This is the important hire. I think you can bring in Chad Morris and talk about X's and O's and talk about him scoring points. Who do you get as a defense coordinator is almost as big a hire as the head coach in a lot of these situations.
Chad Chilcote says that dude looked like he had the stomach flu. I mean, I will admit, I would have thought that Chad Morris, I didn't really know that much about his sort of how he looked or how he sounds, but he'd been the offensive coordinator at Clemson. That seems sort of like a fun place. He'd been head coach at SMU. That's kind of a freewheeling Texas school. I would have thought you'd get a little bit more personality from Chad Morris.
I expected
that guy seems like a pretty dull.
Yeah, I expected a little more like Dan Mullen, where you get off the plane, you're hugging people, dapping people.
He's dull as dishwater, man.
But I'm with you. I thought he would have brought a little more energy, but in the end, it's like I've said on this show a million times. Winning changes everything, and if the guy can go out there and win football games, it ain't going to matter how much he smiles.
In the comment section, Jake Higginbottom says Chad Morris needs defense, or it's Kevin Sumlin all over again. Here's what I'll say, though. It's a lot easier for an offensive-minded head coach to find a defensive coordinator than it is for a defensive-minded head coach to find an offensive coordinator.
It's tough.
There's just a lot more defensive coordinators because most of those guys are not becoming head coaches. So Morris, good offensive mind, finding a defensive guy. The composite of that story is that's a little bit more likely needle to thread than one of these defensive guys like Jeremy Pruitt, and we'll talk more about him in a moment, having to try to find an offensive coordinator. That's what's hard to do.
Well, I think there's another way of looking at that, too. I've always been a believer that when you bring in the offensive coordinator, he has to have a similar mentality that you want to have on defense. Yeah. I think that's what's really played well with Jim Chamey and Kirby Smart. I think that Kirby Smart has this toughness, this edge, want to be good in the front seven. I think that Jim Chaney kind of complements that well, if that makes any sense. You go through spring ball, you have these one-on-one periods, this run versus run. I think it's played out well for both sides. On the flip side of that, you can have a coach on the defense side that wants to be tough all you want to. Will Muschamp being one of those guys. But if you don't have a philosophy on the other side of the ball that fits that, I don't think it's good marriage.
Raymond Cox says, hey, y'all, I'm sorry I'm late. Would y'all mind starting over? That's pretty funny, Raymond. I like that. Jeff Dorsett says, I bet $2 to win $50 on Morris becoming the next Tennessee coach. Dadgum Jerry Jones in Arkansas. So $2 to win 50, and at one point in time, it looked like Morris going to get that job. I'd be mad about that too.
Yeah, you'd be mad you didn't put more on it, $50 at that point, and just to see if you can make a ton of money off of it.
Yeah, listen, that's a pretty good bet right there, and it almost worked out. By the way, speaking of Chad Morris here for a moment, so Brent Bielema tweets out his own. Yesterday we did this whole thing about coaches sort of thanking other coaches and wishing them well. This may be the weirdest of them all. Bielema, who was just fired from Arkansas, wishes Chad Morris well here, saying, hashtag Woo Pig. Congratulations, Coach Chad Morris, on this opportunity, a very special place for you and your family, well-deserved and earned.
That's so weird.
Hashtag Woo Pig. I mean, listen, I'm going to give Bielema credit. This is kind of a classy move to do, but it also proves that all that hand-wringing from some of the media about how Bielema was fired, that it was some travesty that that Bielema was fired, immediately after the game, as opposed to after a lame duck press conference, or like there was some sort of magically better time to fire him. This guy got paid on the way out the door. He doesn't give a rip about when he was fired. He knew he was getting fired a month and a half ago. So much so he's like, "Hey, Chad Morris, good luck. Y'all are made for each other." Like, this guy doesn't care any about all that. So all that media hand wringing, can we put that to bed for a change?
Yeah, it's like, Chad Morris, I got a house that's for rent. Yeah, fully furnished. Yeah, come on and live in it. You can live. You can be my buddy. I got a basement for you.
But pretty classy move here overall.
I think it is.
Right?
I think this goes along the lines with everything we've heard from Bielema since he's left Arkansas. I think he was very thankful to be, having been a part of that program. I think he moved off in a good way. And I don't want to speak for Arkansas fans here, but I think a lot of you guys really still love Brett Bielema. It just didn't work out. It doesn't mean you
do they?
I think so. It's not like he left like Hugh Freeze or like Bob Petrino. Or
these Arkansas fans?
Maybe. I don't know. You guys tell me in the comment section. I don't know. That's the feeling I've got from reading some of the comments.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from some Arkansas fans on that. I got the impression that Arkansas fans had grown really tired of being.
Well, I think as a coach, they grew really tired of him. And his inconsistencies on the football field. But I think as a guy, I think they still have a lot of pride in the fact that he left the university.
Here's the other thing too. I think that, and after this we'll move on, but I think that some Arkansas fans were so upset with Jeff Long, the fact that he may have kind of unplugged himself from really dealing with them in a direct, face-to-face way, that maybe some of the anger that would have gone towards Bielema actually went in the direction of Jeff Long, a guy that I do think Arkansas fans did sort of get tired of.
Yeah, and listen, the comments are starting to come in too. I love Brett as a coach.
There you go. Yes. I see Cody Peets there.
I love Coach B. And that's just the feeling I've got from some of the Arkansas fans we've seen. And that's on Twitter too. I've seen some of the Arkansas fans. I just don't think it worked out as a head coach. And it's kind of, it is interesting, that dynamic. It goes to show you, in my opinion, really, what you expect at a place like Arkansas. Like Florida fans are never going to love Jim McElwain. They're just not. I mean, Jim McElwain's on the outside. Please head to the West Coast. But that's just not how things are at Arkansas, and I still think a lot of people love Brett Bielema.
Now, Jamie Bailey says I love Brett Bielema. He's a Georgia fan. I wouldn't.
I'll take anybody on my side of the argument. Come on, Jamie.
Logan Westerman says BA's disbelief is amazing! All caps, exclamation mark. I can't tell if that's a compliment or not.
I think it is.
Does it mean that I sold disbelief well, or that it's amazing that I found that difficult to believe? You can tell me, Logan. It's good to have you on the program today. Let me move on here and get back to Tennessee for item number 6 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Jeremy Pruitt is the coach at Tennessee now. Who is his offensive coordinator going to be? Well, let's talk about a couple of these names here. Let me start with T. Martin here for a moment, because it would appear that Martin is not on his way to Tennessee in any capacity. Did not get really a serious look at his head coach, maybe not offensive coordinator either. Let me show you some of what's been said about that on social media. This is coming from Mark Schlabach, who writes that USC offensive coordinator T. Martin, a former Vol quarterback, guided the Volunteers to a 1998 national championship, not expected to return to his alma mater as offensive coordinator, sources told ESPN. Let me stick on Martin here for a moment. Did they do him a disservice for not giving him any more attention than this? I mean, I hate to say it this way, but it's pretty easy to sort of read between the lines on this. Some important people at Tennessee are just not impressed with T. Martin at all. Fairly or unfairly, they're not impressed with T. Martin because they passed him over as a grad assistant years ago. Didn't really give him the time of day as a head coach. There were leaked information that he might be willing to consider becoming the offensive coordinator at Tennessee. Ignored him there as well. That's a touchy subject, isn't it?
I think it has to be, especially for a guy like T. Martin. And I mentioned this last week. Listen, if I'm number 10 on your coaching list, don't call me. I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to have to rescue you. I don't want Phil Fulmer to have to call me after he gets the AD job and me show up on campus. But let me explain to you why I think this is a good thing for Tennessee. If T. Martin continues to grow, continues to get jobs, maybe be a head coach in another place, and in 3 and 4 years, if Jeremy Pruitt doesn't work out, I think T. Martin's the guy to go to. I think that keeping him separate from the Jeremy Pruitt saga and the saga that has kind of engulfed this program over the last couple of weeks, I think it could turn out in the end to be a positive thing if Jeremy Pruitt doesn't work out. I think it's almost like Gus Malzahn at Auburn. You know, Gene Chizik's going downhill. Gus Malzahn takes off to Arkansas State, and then guess what? When Chizik's fired, you call Gus Malzahn back up and say, hey, we need a head coach.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that might be an angle.
It seems like, though, for T. Martin, the pathway of going from USC OC, and he's actually worked at USC for a little bit longer than I realized, but the pathway from USC OC to SEC head coach to place like Tennessee, that's just not working. It seems like T. Martin, if he's going to get the attention, and I'm not saying this way it's supposed to be, I'm just telling you what I can see based on how it did unfold. If Martin wants to be a coach at a place like Tennessee, he's got to go be a South Alabama coach or some level of program like that to sort of prove that he can handle being a head coach, because the folks at Tennessee don't believe he's capable.
Yeah, and obviously the folks at Georgia State, I think that looked at him as possibly being a head coach. South Alabama just hired themselves a new coach today. I don't know. Maybe it's like Les Miles. He's not interviewing well. Maybe he's not making a good impression.
In this case, though, he doesn't even really get the full-fledged interview.
Right.
I mean, Mel Tucker gets 2 interviews. Kevin Steele gets 2 interviews. Jeremy Pruitt gets 2 interviews. He gets hired. Philip Fulmer talked to T. Martin over the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a blow-off. That's it certainly comes across that way when you're, you got these SEC teams will, get in a private jet to go have some Gulf
going to
shrimp.
Dallas, Manhattan.
They'll turn these private jets on at a moment's notice. But he's like, hey, for this one, let me just pick up the phone and just use the phone here. I mean, something about that just feels like they didn't quite give him the respect that maybe you'd think a national championship quarterback was due for a guy that's got a legit coaching resume.
Yeah,
he's the offensive coordinator at USC. They just won the Pac-12. I'm not telling you that they're supposed to hire him, but at least consider him.
Well, right? and I think there's something that goes into that. If Philip Fulmer is the guy that was his coach, I mean, it's not like this is a disconnect between the AD and the former player. I mean, these guys work together. And so there's something going on there, in my opinion. And maybe it was Philip Fulmer saying, hey, you know what? The resume is not quite long enough. I don't want to get you involved in this situation. We're going to move on with Jeremy Pruitt, and maybe down the road we can make this happen. But I don't know what the disconnect is.
Jamie Bailey talking about T. Martin being a Vol for life. He says Vol for life sounds like a prison sentence. It's a pretty funny line, Jamie. By the way, one more.
He cracked me up a minute ago too, because Radbury said I love Brett Bielema. He said I love Jim McElwain too. You guys are on it today, man. I love it.
One more OC comment here. So Clay Travis tweets this out, that he's been told that multiple SECs, including Tennessee, are pursuing Hugh Freeze as offensive coordinator. That would be a hell of a hire. Listen, I don't hate Clay the way that some of y'all do. He's been wrong about everything. I mean, he thought that John Gruden was getting his job. He's been wrong 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So the fact that he thinks that Hugh Freeze is going to be an SEC offensive coordinator doesn't mean a hill of beans to me. And I don't say that as a Clay Travis hater. I don't hate him the way some of y'all do. Peach has been wrong about everything.
Well, in his defense, who hasn't been wrong about the Tennessee coaching hire? I mean, everything that was reported over the last 2 weeks, everybody's been wrong. Nobody 2 weeks ago said, you know what, Jeremy Pruitt is the guy that's going to get it.
There was a published report the other day that Georgia was working with Hugh Freeze as an analyst, and quite possibly an unpaid analyst. Georgia sent out an official press release. Georgia sent out an official press release denying that Freeze had been working in any capacity at Georgia. That's how toxic Hugh Freeze may still be at Georgia or around the SEC. The fact that Georgia had to send out an official release just to refute that he was even working as an unpaid analyst for Georgia. I think that Freeze will be an SEC offensive coordinator again at some point, but not in 2018. There's still a little too much toxicity there dating back to his time at Ole Miss.
Well, and let me add another layer to that, is that, and you mentioned it on yesterday, so Jeremy Pruitt at the places he's been has had a couple of questions asked about some of the character issues. And you mentioned Georgia. I think it happened at Florida State as well, and I think there's been a little bit at Alabama. I love Jeremy Pruitt, but there has been questions character-wise about what's been going on at some of the stops. Do you want to add Hugh Freeze into that mix if you're Tennessee right now? Do you want to, hey, this guy said something about Jeremy Pruitt and this guy said something about Hugh Freeze, and get those guys sandwiched together? I know that Clay says it's a home run hire. I don't think it's that much of a knockout of the park. I think that he's a
great play caller.
He's a great play caller. But Tennessee right now, do they really need those questions in there?
Well, we're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
From a football standpoint, that's a great hire.
I think
From the off-field stuff, you may be able to withstand it. This is one of those things where a veteran coach like Nick Saban can bring in someone like Steve Sarkisian, who has his own off-field drama for a very different reason, and totally weather that storm. That's not a big deal. Jeremy Pruitt's a rookie head coach. A rookie head coach cannot hire someone who's A, more experienced than you are, and B, has a laundry list of negative things associated with his name.
Well, and here's what I will say about Jeremy Pruitt, and there's been a couple of people online that have said similar things to what I'm about to say. this is not your typical Saban disciple. I don't see Jeremy Pruitt as like kind of falling in line. I guarantee you, the first time a booster at Tennessee calls Jeremy Pruitt and tells him something, Jeremy Pruitt's going to tell you, I don't care. I mean, this is a guy who kind of walks to the beat of his own drum. So maybe it is, I think like Jeremy Pruitt, like maybe he, marches to the beat of his own drum, sort of like Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin did things his own way at Tennessee. There's some coaches out there that just do their things their own way. Maybe that's Jeremy Pruitt right now and says, you know what, we have to win first and foremost if I'm going to keep my job around here, so Hugh Freeze is going to be on the phone.
We're very late, but Terrence Collins says that Hugh Freeze is just like Art Briles. He won't be touched. I hate to get into the muck and the mire over this. I think that Art Briles and Hugh Freeze are very different kinds of people. The initial issue with Hugh Freeze is the NCAA stuff. He's going to have to sit with a 2-game suspension, I believe, when he coaches again. If that's the only punishment, then the NCAA thing's not that big of a deal. The other stuff in terms of the off-field negativity, Briles was sort of alleged to kind of help cover up what might have been a crime, whereas Hugh Freeze was doing something that, while unsavory, not necessarily criminal in nature. I guess it's somewhat criminal. But in terms of how the public's going to view the two people, they're going to view Briles a lot more harshly than they're going to view Hugh Freeze. Freeze is a bit of a laughingstock right now because of the call girl stuff, but he's not untouchable because that. Right. Listen, there are a lot of coaches that had a lot of issues in terms of extramarital stuff. Hugh Freeze would be the first one to coach again after that.
No. I mean, you've seen a guy like Bob Petrino bounce back after everything that's happened with him. And Art Briles, like you said, I'm not going to dive into that situation, but that affected a lot of other people other than Art Briles. This situation with Hugh Freeze was centered around stuff that affected him and his family, so I don't view them kind of in the same capacity. I also, and this kind of adds to my point, I think there's a lot of other options out there that probably aren't quite as good at play callers, but are pretty good offensive coordinators. Dan Enos and Billy Napier and other guys like names like that I think you can get pretty close to what you're getting.
I think if Dan Enos became the offensive coordinator at Tennessee, that'd be bad news for a lot of the SEC East. I think Enos is a pretty good coach.
I agree. Billy Napier is the same way. He has ties to Pruitt through Alabama. He's been at Arizona State for the last few years. Pretty good OC, pretty good offensive mind.
AT&T's proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. Good to have you with us here on AT&T SEC Country Live today. Item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. Maybe a knife in the back of Ohio State. A little bit more from Minkah Fitzpatrick, who we'll show you this tweet here from Charlie Potter, who says, Fitzpatrick thanked Iowa linebacker Josie Jewell for beating Ohio State 55-24, helping Alabama reach college football playoff. I just said, thank you for beating up on Ohio State. I said this to you the other day, and I believe I'm right about this. I think, obviously, Alabama fans love being in the playoff. I think there's something about it that's made it a little bit more sweet, knowing you got there by stepping on top of Ohio State to get there. I'm not going to read too much into what Fitzpatrick may have told the Iowa player there, but that sort of feels like more evidence to support that point, that it's good to be in the playoff, but it's also good to do it at the expense of the Buckeyes, who I don't think many people in Alabama like.
Yeah, I mean, this is not something that I dealt with in my playing career at Alabama, but I can tell you, in my time in the NFL and that Falcons locker room, when you have teams start to knock each other off, and in 2011 when Alabama makes it, in 2012, you go up and say, hey, man, your university played really well this past weekend. Appreciate what you did. Or even if their team loses, there's a little bit of that trash talk and thinking going on in the locker room. So it doesn't surprise me to look at a guy like Minkah, who is the captain of this football team, running into some of these other guys from the schools and just having chit-chat, talking football, talking about the situations that are going on with their universities. I think that's a cool thing.
I mean, I think that there are some things, some programs that are rivals, even though they don't play very much. I think Clemson and Alabama are getting pretty close to being that. Yeah. They've actually played the last 2 years. But Alabama and Ohio State, these two teams that don't play each other hardly ever, haven't played since 2014. Right. Hadn't played before that in quite some time, and yet they seem to talk about each other an awful lot. And this is one of those things where Alabama and Ohio State are a rivalry, even though these two teams don't play very much.
Right, and you've mentioned a couple times it's the blue blood thing, and there's also the Urban Meyer Nick Saban thing. It doesn't, it predates Ohio State and Urban Meyer, but it goes back to Florida when he was there, and Nick Saban kind of taking over, and Nick Saban obviously winning the game in 2009, and Urban Meyer heading over to Ohio State a couple years later. So there is definitely some of that trash talking, but I definitely agree with you about the Clemson thing. This Clemson head-to-head rivalry is reaching epic proportions.
And by the way, let me say this one more thing about Urban Meyer and Nick Saban side by side here. It wasn't that long ago, just a couple of years, that when you actually spoke with the greatest coaches in college football, you mentioned Urban Meyer and Nick Saban in the same breath. How funny, though, after the last 2 years, that Urban Meyer reputation seems to have dropped a little bit. The blowout to Clemson last year, the blowout to Iowa, really a disqualifier for the college football playoff this year. The notion of Meyer being the same caliber of coach as Nick Saban, over the last 2 years, it's become a little bit more difficult to make that case.
Well, I think when I look at it and kind of compare the two, I think Meyer's an elite offensive coach. I think Nick Saban's an elite defensive coach. What you get is when you're an elite offensive coach, kind of sometimes what you get is some of those lopsided losses like Ohio State's had the last couple of years. That's definitely a notch on the wrong side of the armor right now for Urban Meyer.
Can I go back to Tennessee for 1 minute? Because Chad Clark said a really interesting comment in the comment section. He says that Philip Fulmer is going to micromanage Jeremy Pruitt. He's going to be gone in 2 years along with Fulmer. I don't know that that will be true, but that is an interesting subplot we probably haven't talked about very much. Yeah. You're working for a former coach, a guy who coached at this program and not all that long ago. That is not a position that everybody want to be in. Can we trust Philip Fulmer here to leave Jeremy Pruitt alone and work the program the way that he wants to? Or is this going to be Fulmer's attempt to be a puppeteer who we've already heard that Fulmer tried to sort of back channel the situation and become AD himself. Is he going to have some sort of back channel dealings here to see the football team run the way that he wants it to be?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this a couple of minutes ago that in my opinion, this is not a puppet situation. This is not a Nick Saban disciple situation. Jeremy Pruitt, anybody who knows Jeremy Pruitt or has listened to him talk, he's his own man. I have a hard time believing that Jeremy Pruitt's going to step into a situation where Philip Fulmer, of all people, is kind of telling him what to do and how to manage the football team. And listen, Gene Stallings came out yesterday or earlier today and said that, you know what, if I'm Jeremy Pruitt, I'm leaning on a guy like Philip Fulmer, maybe bouncing some ideas off him, so maybe it's not that much of a bad thing.
Stephen Earle, Jeremy Pruitt ain't bouncing ideas off Philip Fulmer. I mean, you think Jeremy Pruitt thinks Philip Fulmer knows more about football than he does?
Not about football. Not about football. I'm talking about running the football team. You know, running the football team, being a head coach in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee. Philip Fulmer knows way more about that than Jeremy Pruitt does right now.
Not from Pruitt's perspective.
Well, that's probably true. That's probably very true.
Stephen Earle says Fulmer's going to ask Jeremy Pruitt to grow his hair out so he can tell him how to comb and part it.
Yeah, it might be.
A lot of our audience is
10 years.
A lot of our audience is very, very concerned about that. That's kind of an interesting comment to make there as well, that this is going to be one of these deals where Fulmer tries to micromanage Jeremy Pruitt to death. I think it's an interesting idea. I had not thought as much about that, but I think that's a really good point. Item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list. So we've gotten some new information about a story we talked about a few days ago. And frankly, now that I know the whole story or the story that's been told, I'm actually a little disappointed here. So one of the great pictures of the coaching search silly season for me, I just love this picture. This is the moment we knew that Jimbo Fisher was taking the Texas A&M job. When, like the Grinch, he took his Christmas tree. Like, it's not even December yet. And he's already throwing that, that's actually on December 1st. On December 1st, he's throwing that Christmas tree into the yard. If that's not symbolic of a guy who's just done in Tallahassee and moving on to College Station, I don't know what was. But come to find out, the story might not actually be that good because Jimbo Fisher goes on the Dan Patrick Show. Dan, like a good journalist, asks him, hey, what was going on with that Christmas tree? And the Fisher answer, this may be the truth, but if it is the truth, it's a little disappointing. Here's Jimbo.
The guys who come to put my Christmas tree up that week said they got it out and said, Coach, it's broke. What happened? It was broke, so I put a new one up. And he said, so we'll get rid of the other one. Okay, so they set it on the curb for it to be picked up. That was what it was. There was a new Christmas tree in my house. It's still in my house. I mean, that's exactly what that guy. I didn't throw it out. I didn't throw it. I was actually at work. There was a group who comes in and puts the lights and everything across the house because I'm never there. You know, you're always on recruiting. We had a group, Espositos, who comes in and does it. And he called me and said, Jimbo, this thing's over 10 years old and it's broke up. So I said, you need a new one. So I said, okay, put a new one up. So they put a new one up and set the other one on the curb.
So you buying that? I mean, did he throw the Christmas tree out because it was broken, or did he throw the Christmas tree out because he was blowing this joint?
Well, I think this is a disappointing interview for me, and it's not because of the fact that he got rid of it because it was broken. It's the fact that he says somebody else was doing it. Because the whole time in my head, I'm wanting to picture Jimbo Fisher just with two hands on this Christmas tree.
Oh, yeah, just
throwing it out to the curb. You know, he's trying to pack his bags, trying to get on the airplane and head to College Station. And then he says, you know, someone else did it for him. He was at work. That to me was a letdown.
So here's the other thing I don't understand. Is Esposito's the company that does his Christmas decorations for him? Is he paying for a company to decorate his Christmas tree?
Oh, I guarantee you.
Come on, man.
No,
you gotta decorate your own Christmas tree.
You can't hate on him for that.
You gotta decorate.
He's so busy. I mean, he's working 14 hours a day. He doesn't have to decorate his own Christmas tree. It's probably just for recruits, anyways. He's probably not going to be at home for Christmas.
It's one thing if you get somebody to come out there and like hang. I know there's some companies that hang the lights on the front. But the Christmas tree in your living room, at least put the ornaments on your own Christmas tree.
No, I don't think so. Listen, I don't think Kirby Smart's decorating his own tree. I don't think Nick Saban's decorating his own tree. This, to me, is just something coaches don't do. They're so busy during these bowl practices and everything else going on. I don't think for 1 second that almost maybe no SEC coaches decorate their own tree.
There's something I could say here that I'm not going to say, but I'll just say it this way. A lot of problems in life could be avoided if you maybe decorate the Christmas tree together over the course of the years.
Possibly so. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Listen, I'm always going to be the guy that decorates my tree. I'm just saying these guys are so busy right now. A lot of them are going to be at bowl sites during Christmas. So it's not like they're going to be like, oh, let me decorate this tree and make sure I put my own ornaments on it. I just don't think they have that much time.
I still like the idea of the picture being the symbolic gesture that it is, even if that's not actually the case.
Me too. I love it.
Let me move on to item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10. By the way, this is also a update on a story from the other day ago. So we talked about the granting of transfer releases for a lot of the Ole Miss players, and one of those guys is Shea Patterson, the big high-profile quarterback, and well, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan needs a quarterback. Jim Harbaugh at Michigan also could probably use a few other talented players in the SEC as well. So Harbaugh, being the opportunist that he is, the Michigan plane was seen in Oxford, Mississippi. In fact, I think we've got a photo here of that Michigan plane with the big M on the side right there in Oxford, Mississippi. We'll show you this. It's kind of a symbol of just how serious that Harbaugh takes all this in terms of being able to go out there and look for these recruits, because this is obviously a guy that wants to get as much of this as he can. Chase Parham had this. There's the Michigan plane right there in Oxford, Mississippi. Of course, Chase writes there that this should make the internet fun for a minute. People like these annex from Harbaugh. But apparently one of the guys that does not like these annex is Ole Miss athletic director Ross Bjork, because Bjork, in a message to Ole Miss fans, also lets this be known at the end. I'm going to read from the second paragraph here. He says, furthermore, we're not going to allow outside influences to define who we are. And we're going to use every avenue available to hold those accountable who tamper with our student athletes. Is that Bjork accusing Harbaugh of tampering by having that plane in Oxford, Mississippi this week?
It's possible. It's possible. And here's the way I kind of read into it is watch your step. Watch your step if you're going to fly your plane in Oxford, Mississippi. And maybe there's no rules that Jim Harbaugh broke. There's probably not any rules. If he's being that public about what was going on, then he probably went about it in a very careful way. I think that what Ross Bjork's trying to do is maybe just a little bit of intimidation factor when it comes to some of these other head coaches that are stepping into this situation, maybe possibly firing off a text message to a friend that knows a player. I think he's just saying, hey, man, be careful the way you approach our program. We're not going to take this lion down. You're just going to come in here and steal our players. We're going to make sure we look into a lot of these situations.
By the way, Katie Reagan Shaver says Esposito's is a huge home and garden store in Tallahassee. She has $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 signs. So Jimbo Fisher
so it's money.
Going to the $5 sign place for his Christmas tree stuff. But here's the thing about Ole Miss, though. Why are you fighting Jim Harbaugh? You should have fought the NCAA. I mean, to me, Ole Miss laid down and just took whatever the NCAA gave them. That's who you should fall back against. You should have said, how come you're not punishing Leo Lewis? You should have said, and Mississippi State, you should have said everything you knew about that situation. You've just kind of, sort of played dead. I mean, North Carolina in basketball just got off scot-free because they didn't cooperate. I feel like Ole Miss sort of cooperated with the NCAA a little too much, and now wants to fight Michigan over Shea Patterson after the fact. If Ross Bjork wanted to show some toughness, how about you fight the NCAA?
Yeah, I understand that, but I think he's kind of fighting the war on two fronts. They're going to appeal the bowl ban. They're going to do all this appealing that they're going to try to do within the NCAA and go to these, committee on infraction, go to all these hearings. But he also he can't let it go unaddressed. I mean, he can't not address the situation with Jim Harbaugh. He's on the phone probably with the NCAA. He's probably talking to boosters, probably trying to get that situation ironed out. But you can't not address Jim Harbaugh being in Oxford, Mississippi. You've got to say something about that as well. So this little note, I don't mind it. I think he's fighting a war on two fronts.
All right. AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T Entertainment Your Way. Let me move on here to item number 10. And, we already know from Missouri they're losing Josh Heupel, their offensive coordinator, moving on to UCF. He's now the head coach there. And according to what somebody told Dan Patrick this week, an NFL scout told Patrick, he's really impressed with Drew Lock, and that maybe Drew Lock could be on his way to being a first-round draft pick in the NFL. Not a guy that we had on our radar maybe leaving school, but if Lock, and a lot of teams need quarterbacks right now in the NFL, if Lock impresses some of these scouts and has a nice bowl game against Texas, is there a chance that Missouri loses out on him too, and all of a sudden a lot of what you liked about the Missouri offense for 2017 is all of a sudden gone now?
I think there's definitely a chance of that happening. And I think in this report you mentioned Patrick Mahomes. Dan Patrick mentioned Patrick Mahomes was saying, this is a guy who I was hearing last year was jumping up the draft boards. And then all of a sudden, they're trading up to get this guy as a quarterback that really wasn't a huge name going into the draft. I think that's one of the scary things. If you're a quarterback or one of these players that is jumping to the NFL, that you say, man, my name has been at the top of the draft board. If you're a Darius Geis making a decision, or if you're another one of these quarterbacks making the decision, you have to be careful, because there are guys like this every year, like Drew Lock, that jump up and kind of take the bull by the horns and all of a sudden become a top 10, draft pick. I think you have to be careful of that. I think Drew Lock's a great passer. I think he's kind of a Brett Favre mold where he takes a lot of risk, but I think he could make an NFL franchise better.
By the way, Chad Chilcote said Harbaugh only went into Oxford because he wanted one of those chickens on a stick, the way that Ed Orgeron was talking. Yeah. But you told us this. He didn't go get chicken on a stick.
He went to IHOP.
Yeah, it's like Ed Orgeron tried to tell you what the meal you wanted to get in Oxford was, that chicken on a stick from, was it an Exxon station?
Yeah, and that would have been such a Jim Harbaugh thing to do, wouldn't it? Going and tweet it or Instagram a picture of him getting the chicken on the stick.
It's actually a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he kind of fumbled the ball. I'm kind of disappointed in Jim Harbaugh.
All right, our champion of life in a moment is an update on another story that we've talked about this week, and this one may be maybe the best of all. We'll do that coming up. Before that, though, let's do our AT&T look ahead. As I told you, AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. And let's look ahead to the basketball action in the SEC on Saturday. Here's some of the top games. You've got Monmouth, a fixture in the NCAA tournament, taking on Kentucky. Lipscomb against 24th ranked Tennessee. Vols in the top 25 for the first time in a while. I'm going to give you 3 guesses what PV-A&M stands for. Do you know?
Prairie View.
There you go. I didn't know. Prairie View. It's a battle of the A&Ms. Prairie View A&M against Texas A&M. Florida, which has lost 3 straight against number 17 Cincinnati.
Yeah, Florida had a big upset last night.
Lost to Loyola Chicago. Yeah. And the Golden Gophers of Minnesota travel to Arkansas. That's some of your top SEC games on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll probably tune into a couple of those. I'm telling you, I'm getting plugged into this thing.
Alabama plays. Those aren't the only SEC games.
Alabama, huge win over Rhode Island, the Rams last night. We talked about it yesterday.
Lamar Odom play for the Rams in that one?
I don't think so. I don't think he was on the court for that one.
All right, let's do our champion of life. We always close out the show the same way. Much like former Tennessee coach Butch Jones, we're looking for champions of life. We're still looking for them as well. And yesterday on the program, we talked about Herm Edwards becoming it was earlier this week. Actually, it was yesterday. It was the day before yesterday, but you get the point. Herm Edwards, the brand new coach at Arizona State, had kind of a curious moment in the press conference. Well, following up to a curious moment for that, also a curious moment in a behind-the-scenes video produced at Arizona State. You want an idea of just how long this guy's been out of coaching? He doesn't even know what modern college football jerseys even look like anymore. He sees the new form-fitting, tight college football jersey. He thinks it's the kind of thing that a girl would wear. Here's Herm Edwards.
The girls?
No, this is a game jersey. See how tight it is?
Tight.
Yeah, you can't.
What? You're not expected to put it on, man.
No. You're just gonna put it on a mannequin in there.
This is a game jersey?
Yeah.
Bro, that's tight.
Technology, they don't even have belts anymore. That's how tight they are.
You know, the technology, man, that thing stretches out, man, and then gets you real tight for it's crazy, isn't it?
That's me. Good girl. That was a girl. That little kid's jersey.
This guy has no idea what modern college football is about.
No, he doesn't.
He thinks the new tight form-fitting jerseys are for girls. He has no idea that the Sun Devils. I mean, did they just see this guy on the internet one day and say, "Hey, that's going to be our next coach"? What is Arizona State doing here?
Possibly so. And there's a reason these jerseys are so tight. Because I used to play in a little bit looser jersey. You don't want anybody to be able to grab your jersey. That's why the new jerseys are so form-fitting. So snug, so nobody can quite grab you.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that to us.
Yeah.
I think we figured that part.
Well, I don't think Herm Edwards knew it. That's kind of my point. That I don't think Herm Edwards is he used to play with the sleeves down.
How about the fact that you had to be told they don't even wear belts anymore?
Yeah, I don't know. He's been unplugged for a while, for sure.
The forward pass also legal in college football as well now, Herm, too.
It's a good idea.
Everybody doesn't just play the single wing anymore. All right, thanks for being with us here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hope you all have a great weekend. Enjoy whatever it is that you do. We'll be back on Monday, getting closer to the bowl season, getting closer to the college football playoff for Alabama and Georgia. We'll talk about it all. Between now and then, we'd love to have you catch up on the podcast at iTunes. We'll put the new episode of the show up right away so you can hear that, and you can share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC each and every day here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern for another episode of AT&T SEC Country Live.